Charles, we're talking about the crash of the dollar, but if we look back to the history of the dollar, we've lost 90-some% of it. Hasn't it already crashed?
You're right. It has been a long-term, slow motion devaluation since the creation of the Fed almost 100 years ago. Since the creation of the Fed in 1913, the dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power. You scratch your head, Jack, and you wonder, why do we keep these bozos in charge? What are the American people thinking when they buy this bill of goods? I mean, if it were a private company, if you had stock in a private company and they'd managed to destroy 96% of your value, wouldn't you throw the rascals out at the next board meeting? But the American people have been mesmerized. They've been cooed into this slumber with all kinds of childlike, naive beliefs about the economy. The American people have been cajoled and conditioned to believe all kinds of things, like that we can spend our way out of prosperity. And so you're talking about the election facade. The election the other day, you've got your choice between Republican Keynesians and Democratic Keynesians, all of whom agree that, well, the best thing the country can do is spend its way to prosperity. They all believe that money can be created out of thin air. They all believe that the richest people in the world, like Americans, can forever continue to borrow to keep this government's voracious appetite fed, continue to borrow from some of the poorest people in the world. Or, to use your analogy about a flat tire, that you can fix a credit bubble that was artificially pumped up to begin with and finally popped, that you can fix that by pumping a whole lot more money into it. I mean, and Americans, I do see signs that Americans are beginning to awaken from these childlike myths. But for the most part, it's the myths that still prevail.
Yeah. Isn't the plan, though, I mean, if we're going to, I hate to jump to the end here. We only have limited time, right, Charles?
Yep.
Isn't the end game to get us to a global currency? And isn't also it beneficial for those who are, loaning or borrowing money from China and from all over the world and the United Arab Emirates, et cetera? I mean, to devalue the dollar so they only have to pay back in dollars, and they're worthless.
There are parties for whom that may be a very good idea. The thing that astonishes me, Jack, is the way that this can be sold to the American people. I saw the Commerce Secretary on CNBC the other day, and he was talking about the dollar's woes and the devaluation, the destruction of the U.S. dollar and its purchasing power that affects every American. I mean, when you go out and you buy things, everything is made of something that comes from somewhere. When Americans go out and fill their gas tanks, it comes from, it takes the purchasing power, the strength of the dollar to buy that petroleum that they put into their gas tanks. The Commerce Secretary is out there, and he spends about a millisecond saying, oh, yeah, it's too bad about the dollar. And then he brightens up, he puts on the happy face, and he talks about the destruction of the dollar like it's a good thing. And here's the catechism. This is the line they use to cajole the American people into going along with this currency debauchery, this currency destruction. He brightens up, and he says, but it's just great for American manufacturing because, cheaper dollar, our goods are more competitive overseas. Let me tell you something. During George Bush's presidency, the U.S. dollar, talk about your cheaper dollar, the U.S. dollar lost 20% of its purchasing power during Bush's 8 years. So what happened to American manufacturing? Well, we lost a quarter of our manufacturing base during those same 8 years, 4.4 million manufacturing jobs, or in the words of Dr. Phil, how's that been working out for us?
Yeah, there goes that theory, right, Charles?
Yeah, there it goes.
Well, we're getting poorer, and the poorer nations are getting richer. I just have to believe, and I've heard Kissinger and Brzezinski and Scowcroft all say this out loud, that they got to bring us down. We've had it too good for too long, and they're trying to create this global economic parity here. And then once that happens, it's all going to be this wonderful, peaceful utopia world where nothing bad ever happens again, and we're all living, within our means, and we've all got the things that we need, and we get to feel good about ourselves. That's another way it's sold to us.
Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
You did a lot of work in the field of 9/11 truth, and I just really have to commend you for that, because that was extremely brave of you. I worked as a radio host in the Phoenix market. I know how tough that can be. But let's compare the two, can we? Because I saw what happened last year, and I've been calling it this ever since, as an economic 9/11. That was, they needed a economic Pearl Harbor in order to centralize everything, as they did with the so-called intelligence community after 9/11. And now they get to centralize the banks. They get to centralize global infrastructure. We saw what just happened at the G20. We lost a lot of our sovereignty and power in that. Everybody's looking at the cops outside. That's what happened inside. The IMF is now given the special ability to mandate our economic policies, to snoop on every transaction that's out there, everything that's going on, to, again, help us. But if they hadn't had that economic 9/11, that economic Pearl Harbor last September, they couldn't have gotten any of this.
Well, you're right about one thing, and that is a crisis is always, well, it's like that old expression that war is the health of the state. A crisis is always an opportunity for power grabs by the central governing authorities, and this monetary crisis has been no exception. I mean, I cite in my book even the nine chairmen of the largest banks, all good negotiators in their own right, getting called in by Paulson a year ago into the Treasury Secretary and being handed a deal that they have to sell preferred stock to the U.S. Treasury. And the chairman of one of the banks said, "We don't have a problem with toxic mortgages. We don't have a problem with that bad paper. We don't want to do it." But here's what it was described at by one participant. There was no choice involved. It was a take it or take it proposition. So it's an enormous power grab that has gone on, and what is the net effect? The net effect is to shift the financial losses that were all very real, no question about the extent of the losses, and to shift them from the people who willingly took the risk of loss, the banks, the investment institutions, and so on, to the American people. So now, for all of its prior sins, now the Fed looks nothing like another broken-down hedge fund. They've got $750 billion of toxic waste mortgage paper in their portfolio, and all that really happened was the losses being shifted from the people who deserved them to the American people, and those losses will be papered over by the destruction of the purchasing power of the U.S. dollars that Americans save in, hold in, spend in, and more.
Yet they're continuing to dig that hole, aren't they, Charles? I mean, here we are, free money, 0% interest rate if you're approved and you're in the club, of course. They're already building a brand-new toxic derivative scam with the CO2 cap-and-trade carbon credits. That looks to be in excess of $300 to $400 trillion worldwide. Here we go again.
Well, you know what it is? It's like a Sunday morning hangover, and so this same bunch of usual suspects come around and say, "I'll tell you what the cure for the Sunday morning hangover is. Here, have another drink of the same bottle of Fed money management that got us into this mess to begin with."
And what's the cure
so the
for
problems
the Sunday
are never
morning?
metabolized. The problems, none of these problems have ever been liquidated. I had lunch with a banker the other day who told me stories that would curl your hair about what these banks continue over a year later now, continue to hold on their balance sheets. I mean, financial institutions, banks that hold bankrupt companies on their balance sheets as performing loans. I've never heard of such a thing. One regional bank, you multiply this by hundreds of banks across the country, one regional bank that is sitting on $500 million in real estate losses, and so has set aside, made a provision to cover them with $900,000. I mean, it's insane. All we have done is forestalled the problem, the liquidation, the clearing of the books, the adjustment that's needed, and these guys are frantically pumping more air into the tire.
Besides taking my great sponsor's product, Enerfood, what's the cure for the Sunday morning hangover, Charles?
Well, it's temperance, it's rationality, and good judgment on Saturday night.
Something we're not anywhere near, in my humble opinion.
No, sure not.
It just continues going. And you look at all of these things that alleged President Obama is doing, and all of it costs trillions of dollars. I just saw this. I played this on my show, Charles. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. It was, I think, Brad Sherman, Congressman Sherman out in California. He's a Democrat, but he's been pretty open on what he's hearing. He's the one that came out here about a year ago and said they're threatening martial law.
Yeah, I remember it very well.
And he started grilling Geithner, going, "Look, I'm reading your documents. They call for unlimited TARP bailouts forever with no oversight." And he didn't deny it.
Yep.
The thing is, with all of these things that they want to pay for, if we had real money, we could actually buy them ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
And there you go.
Charles Goyette with us. His book is The Dollar Meltdown. It's great. He'll come back with us right after this. Stay tuned.